The sky over the city was the color of steel that Monday morning, clouds swelling like bruises over the skyline. Rain had begun early, tapping against glass windows like impatient fingers. Inside the towering headquarters of Vanguard International, the atmosphere matched the weather, heavy, tense, and charged with an unspoken anxiety that clung to every corner. On the top floor, in the sprawling conference room lined with floor-to-ceiling windows, the most important meeting of the quarter was about to begin. Maxwell Rourke, CEO of Vanguard, sat at the head of the long mahogany table. At 53, he had built his reputation not on inherited wealth but on an almost predatory instinct for spotting both genius and weakness. His gaze was piercing, a startling blue that could feel like an interrogation light when it landed on you. The tailored charcoal suit he wore fit him with an ease that came from habit, but nothing in his demeanor today hinted at ease. His jaw was tight, his expression carved from stone. On the wall behind him, the sleek digital display showed the latest renderings of Aurora Heights, a skyscraper project meant to redefine the city skyline. Its budget alone, nearly $2 billion, made it a high-stakes gamble, but to Maxwell it was more than that. It was personal. He'd promised investors, the city council, and himself that Aurora Heights would be a masterpiece. And what he was looking at now was anything but. This, he said, his voice slow but laced with a precision that made every syllable feel like a cut, is technically competent. But competence isn't why we exist. I asked for something alive. Something that breathes. And instead, he gestured toward the sterile glass tower projected on the screen. I see corporate glass wrapped in safe, market-tested geometry. This is not the vision I described. Around the table, a dozen faces watched him, senior architects, project managers, financial executives. The most nervous of them all was William Harrow, the firm's lead architect for the project. His reputation was formidable, his fees astronomical, and his ego delicate. He cleared his throat, fingers tightening on his pen. Sir, with respect, this design adheres to your original brief. Every angle, every measurement, every... Maxwell didn't let him finish. Every lifeless centimeter. Every uninspired choice. He leaned back slightly, folding his hands, but his eyes stayed locked on Harrow. William, I don't know who you think you're building this for, but it's certainly not for me. Or this city. And that leads me to a suspicion. He let the pause stretch, forcing everyone in the room to lean forward in uneasy silence. I have a feeling that the person who truly conceived Aurora Heights, the real architect, isn't sitting at this table. The words hung in the air like a loaded gun. Several of the junior staff exchanged confused glances. Harrow stiffened, his mouth tightening into a defensive line. Maxwell's voice dropped lower, almost intimate. So. Bring me the real architect. No one moved. The sound of rain filled the silence, each drop hitting the glass with soft, relentless persistence. It was the kind of moment where people looked at one another not for answers, but for deniability. And then, from near the double doors at the back of the room, came a voice, quiet but clear enough to cut through the tension. Sir. Every head turned. Standing just inside the doorway, holding a mop whose damp strands left a small pool on the polished floor, was a woman in a plain gray janitorial uniform. Her dark hair was pulled back into a no-nonsense bun. Her posture was upright, almost military, though there was nothing showy about it. Her skin was a warm olive tone, her hands calloused from work that most of the people in that room had never done in their lives. Lena Morales. Maintenance staff. Invisible in the daily churn of corporate life, until now. She glanced at Harrow, who looked as though she had committed an unspeakable offense simply by speaking. But she straightened her shoulders and continued. I drew it. The disbelief was instant and unanimous. One of the junior architects actually laughed before catching himself. Harrow's voice came out sharp, incredulous. What? This is absurd. She's quiet, Maxwell said, not even raising his voice but silencing the room instantly. His eyes stayed on Lena. "You're telling me, you designed Aurora Heights?" "Not exactly," Lena said, forcing her voice to stay even. "The original concept was fine. But when I saw it in the trash," her eyes flicked toward Harrow, then back to Maxwell. "I sketched my own version. Something that might capture what you were asking for. Mr. Harrow found my sketches. And I guess he adapted them." The room shifted like a living thing, a wave of realization rippling through it. Harrow's cheeks flushed crimson. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "We are not seriously going to waste." "Harrow," Maxwell said, and this time his voice had an edge of steel, "sit down." For a moment it looked like Harrow might refuse, but then, with a tight jaw, he dropped back into his seat, his eyes blazing with restrained fury. Maxwell addressed Lena again. "Do you have proof?" "Not proof, exactly," she admitted. "But I have my original sketches at home. I can redraw it, now, if you want." The air shifted again. A few people looked at Maxwell as though expecting him to laugh and dismiss her. Instead, he stood, his chair gliding silently back. "Get her a drafting table," he ordered. A vice president half rose. "Sir, this is highly irregular." "Irregular," Maxwell said, "is what changes the world. Get her a table." Within minutes, Lena found herself seated at a portable drafting setup, a roll of fresh vellum paper in front of her, a mechanical pencil in her hand. The mop she had been holding was leaned against the wall like a discarded relic from another life. At first, her fingers hesitated. The weight of every eye in the room pressed down on her. She was no stranger to pressure, life had pressed her harder than most, but this was different. These were people who lived and breathed design, and she was about to lay herself bare in front of them. Then she drew the first line. And just like that, the hesitation vanished. Her wrist moved with an ease she had thought she'd lost years ago, curving and cutting lines into forms that seemed to unfold naturally from the page. Her movements were deliberate but fluid, her mind already a few steps ahead of the pencil. Slowly, a structure emerged, a skyscraper not of cold repetition, but of movement and grace. The shapes danced with each other, the balance between glass and steel softened by curves that suggested wind and light and life. The room was silent except for the sound of pencil against vellum and the occasional roll of thunder outside. Even Harrow, arms crossed in smoldering disdain, could not stop himself from watching. When she finally set the pencil down, the building on the paper was everything the renderings on the wall were not. Maxwell stepped forward, leaning over the table. His eyes traced the design, and for the first time that morning, his mouth curved into something like a smile. "This," he said quietly, "is Aurora Heights." Lena met his gaze. "It's what I saw when you described it. Not just the building, but the way it would stand in the city, the way people would feel when they walked through it. I didn't want to build for money or prestige. I wanted to build something that feels alive." For a long moment, Maxwell didn't respond. Then he turned to the room. "From this moment," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a verdict, "Lena Morales is the lead architect on Aurora Heights. Anyone who has a problem with that can see themselves out of this company." The reaction was immediate. Shock. Anger. Admiration. And somewhere, a note of fear. Harrow's chair scraped violently against the floor as he stood. Without a word, he stormed from the room, slamming the glass door behind him so hard it rattled. Lena remained standing by the drafting table, her pencil still in hand. The rain outside had not stopped, but it no longer felt like a weight on her shoulders. It felt cleansing. She didn't know it yet, but the decision Maxwell had just made would not only change her career, it would awaken enemies who had no intention of letting her keep what she had just won.